Today's dramatic plane crash in the Hudson River in New York City drew attention away from the scheduled big news story of the day, which was, of course, the end of the public phase of the presidency of George W. Bush. This is the start of the part where we don't have President Bush to kick around anymore. That said, given his approval ratings and the state of the world his tenure has left us with, there can be no promise that we won't be compelled to try to keep on with the kicking around. The president's farewell address just 90 minutes ago was his last public event, his last speech to the country, and it puts a cap on a furious Karl Rove and Karen Hughes-produced legacy polishing tour that they undertook starting shortly after Election Day. There were more exit interviews than you could count on all your fingers and all your toes, including long sit-downs with pretty much everyone on television, except me and Keith and stuff. There was a big final press conference full of defiance and self-defense that left most observers scratching their collective heads and got everybody mad about Katrina all over again. And there was the announcement that First Lady Laura Bush is working on a book that will detail her own experiences in the White House, all in the name of spinning the history of the Bush administration to the positive. Evidence to the contrary be damned. But tonight was really, truly it. President Bush's farewell address, the official farewell address, his official goodbye, his valedictory, his final public appearance as President of the United States. Now, despite all the overt spin, those of us who keep track of things like this know that the real context of Bush's bye-bye tonight is this. When President Bush arrived in January of 2001, the unemployment rate was 4.2%. Now, on his way out, it's 7.2%. When he arrived, there was a budget surplus of $237 billion. Today, we're looking at a $1.2 trillion deficit. When he arrived, the Consumer Confidence Index was 116. Now it's 38. When he arrived, there were 40 million Americans without health insurance. Today, there are 46 million. And, of course, when he arrived in January of 2001, we were fighting protracted wars in 0 countries that we had preventively invaded and justified occupying through manipulated intelligence. Today, we've been in Iraq for 5.5 years and counting, and the war in Afghanistan is even older than that. Also, there was a vital jewel of an American city called New Orleans back then, and a World Trade Center. It is against that proud backdrop that the George W. Bush presidency publicly ended today. Here are some of the president's final official words to the nation.
Over the past 7 years, a new Department of Homeland Security has been created. The military, the intelligence community, and the FBI have been transformed. Our nation is equipped with new tools to monitor the terrorist movements, freeze their finances, and break up their plots. And with strong allies at our side, we have taken the fight to the terrorists and those who support them.
And also, we invaded Iraq. Is that awkward to bring up here? I'm sorry. Let's go back to the speech.
Afghanistan has gone from a nation where the Taliban harbored al-Qaeda and stoned women in the streets to a young democracy that is fighting terror and encouraging girls to go to school. Iraq has gone from a brutal dictatorship and a sworn enemy of America to an Arab democracy at the heart of the Middle East and a friend of the United States.
And now a brief interlude from the Iraqi shoe thrower guy. When's his trial scheduled for? Anyway, sorry, back to the speech.
These decisions, but there can be little debate about the results. America has gone more than 7 years without another terrorist attack on our soil.
After that first really big, giant one.
When people live in freedom, they do not willingly choose leaders who pursue campaigns of terror.
As for the Palestinians voting for Hamas, we'll just put an asterisk on that one and call it a rounding error.
So around the world, America is promoting human liberty, human rights, and human dignity.
This brief intermission in the president's speech is brought to you by the official symbols of human, quote, liberty, human, quote, rights, and human, quote, dignity, as promoted around the globe by the presidency of George W. Bush.
Like all who have held this office before me, I have experienced setbacks. And there are things I would do differently if given the chance. Yet I've always acted with the best interests of our country in mind. I have followed my conscience and done what I thought was right. You may not agree with some of the tough decisions I have made, but I hope you can agree that I was willing to make the tough decisions.
Was putting Michael Brown, the Arabian Horse Association guy, in charge of FEMA, was that a tough decision? Would you say? Was that hard to do?
In the 21st century, security and prosperity at home depend on the expansion of liberty abroad. If America does not lead the cause of freedom, that cause will not be led. As we address these challenges and others we cannot foresee tonight, America must maintain our moral clarity.
You keep using that word, moral clarity. I am not sure it means what you think it means.
And so, my fellow Americans, for the final time, good night. May God bless this House and our next president. And may God bless you and our wonderful country. Thank you.
Joining us now with her response to the president's farewell address tonight is Arianna Huffington, one of the most influential critics of this president. She is also the proprietor and founder of the Huffington Post. Arianna, it is so nice to see you here in person. Thank you for coming in.
I loved your rebuttal. It should have been the Democratic rebuttal to the president's farewell address.
Probably a little snarky for their tastes, I would imagine. What do you think is the big headline from this speech tonight? Is there a big headline, or is it just Bush says goodbye?
I think the big headline is, to paraphrase Paul Simon, still delusional after all these years. Because it was delusional from beginning to end. From the points that you made about Afghanistan, which he presented as a kind of nice country for a vacation, instead of a country where people are reluctant to leave their homes without armored convoys, and where women have acid thrown on their faces for going to school, to Iraq, which he presented as a friend of the United States rather than a BFF with Iran. Mm-hmm. And what you mentioned about Hamas, which he completely forgot. It's in the news every day. It's a democratically elected terrorist group. And then domestically, the fact that he actually dared to say that this Medicare drug benefit program, which has been declared a disaster by everybody, is actually giving peace of mind to seniors, and that our air and our water are better despite all the best efforts of his protection agency to actually deregulate just about everything. And then moving on to the most kind of stunning thing for me was when he said that he at least should be given credit for making the tough decisions, as though making tough decisions that are wrong is actually something you should take credit for.
But on the tough decisions thing, that really has been the theme of the legacy tour, this idea that, okay, maybe you want to call it torture, we don't think it's torture, and maybe you didn't like the Iraq War, but we like the Iraq War. Ultimately, all we can be faulted for is how badly we wanted to defend the American people. We're just too tough. But I mean, how does that explain Michael Brown? How does that explain, the number 2 guy in the Interior Department going to prison in the Abramoff scandal? How does that explain Harriet Miers, all the cronyism? There was so much that wasn't tough at all. That was really easy for them. But yet they want it to seem like it was all just errors of execution, not of intention.
Yes, and it was also wanting it to seem that his intentions were always good, and that he was willing to court unpopularity in order to do the right thing, and therefore ignoring all the things that were simply wrong decisions, and that they were based on a fundamental principle that he uttered again, which was that somehow we are safer now. And it's very important for everybody who wants to move forward, which is very important, we all want to move forward, to also not allow them this kind of revisionist history where supposedly we're safer, because we're not safer. We're not safer because the world is less safe because of our actions, and we're not safer because here at home we've neglected our infrastructure, we've neglected our public health system, which is going to be essential if, God forbid, there is another attack, and we've neglected just about every other indicator of a healthy society, including education and healthcare.
What I thought was remarkable is that he went back to some overtly religious language in this speech. He went back to the language of good and evil. He had the audacity to talk about American moral clarity and our need to lead on human rights and human dignity issues around the world in the era that, as a closing remark on the era that brought American secret detention and imprisonment without trial and torture under his watch. Is it delusion, or is it brashness in asserting that this really is what human dignity looks like?
Well, it's also being disconnected from reality, which was also shown again by the fact that he did not say anything about what happened in New York today.
Yeah.
And it was dominating everybody's thoughts and news, and there were many examples of great American character there. And at the end, he mentioned American character, so why not actually link it to what had just happened?
Yeah.
But it's almost as though he does really live in that bubble, where maybe he doesn't even know what just happened.
Well, the bubble is about to get a lot less crowded as he goes on, as he ends his presidency. Arianna, it is so nice to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Arianna Huffington is, of course, the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post.